Hey guys, it's Eddie with Kabuki Audio here. Today we're just going to be doing a quick video going over the metallic bass stab in our contact template. So let's listen to it in the context of the track first of all.
And we are all connected.
Okay, so the sound that we're going to be looking at today is this one right here. Cool. So this sound, this preset, it's a pretty simple patch. The thing that's doing all of the work, the processing is doing all of the work. If we turn off the processing, the Ableton processing that we have here, and take a listen. And compare it on. We can see that's doing most of the heavy lifting in the sound. Then if we turn the processing off that's in Serum, we can see it's a very, very simple patch. So if we look at the oscillator page, you can see that the patch is pretty simple. Okay, starting off with just oscillator A. It's just a square wave. It's up to 15 voices in the unison. Detuning is turned down slightly. And one important thing that we have going on here, we actually have the width pulled down to 39 instead of 100. Some other plugins, they have a unison mode where you turn it up and then it's automatically in mono. In order to achieve that and get more of a narrow sound, or to bring it all the way to mono, like if we did this, you need headphones to really be able to hear this. But if we have it on the default of 100, compared to 0, you can see at 100, obviously it's a lot wider, which is nice. But if you sum to mono, when something is really detuned a lot, you can find that a lot of your sound goes away. And just in the process, if I know that I'm going to be detuning a sound a lot, I'll be checking it in mono as I go along, just to make sure that it doesn't sound completely different when you go to mono. Or I like to bring this width down already so that I know what it sounds like more or less when it's in mono. So that's a very important step here. Bring that down, just so you don't get to the end of your sound, check it in mono and find that it sounds completely different. So one little trick here that I like to do on my projects, just a quick little tip. I have, not on this one because it's a template that we're selling, but on my own projects when I'm working on them, and the templates when I'm working on them before I export them out and clean them up, I always have P on my keyboard set to mono so that I can check in mono as I go. In order to do that, you can hit Command K. Or go up here to this key symbol and then go to mono here or whatever control you want, and then just hit a key on your keyboard. And let's delete this so I can show you. So just go down to here to mono, click on that, hit P. Now P, whenever I hit it here, will sum things to mono. So that's important because especially when you get into some, sound design that's using a lot of detuning, you've probably done this before where, if you're doing like super saws or something, anything that has a lot of voices going on, all that detuning, you sum it to mono and then all of a sudden the sound sounds completely different or it disappears. Anyway, with that out of the way, continuing on with this sound, go into the noise oscillator. Actually, before we do that, we'll go on to oscillator B. So we have oscillator B here. Oscillator B here is off. It's -2 semitones down. And we're sending a little bit of FM from B to this sound. So with it on and off, Can't really hear anything right now, but when we compress it and saturate it, it's gonna bring out some of these tones that we're adding here, okay? We have LFO1 automating right now oscillator A's level, its volume, just making it a little bit percussive. And then when we add the filter here, the filter here is making it even more percussive, obviously. And these two things combined are giving the sound its stabby shape. Then we have this white noise here. Being automated by LFO3. This is just gonna make it a little bit more percussive, give it a little bit of an interesting attack. You can't hear it that much right now. It's just very subtle, but again, when compression comes in, saturation, and we process the sound, it's gonna add a nice percussive element to the sound. So that's it for the oscillator page. Moving on to all of our effects. First of all, we have a hyperdimension. I like to add this usually at the very beginning of the chain. Sometimes it's too messy after when you add this and you add a compressor, a lot of really heavy compression afterwards, and maybe I'll put it at the end. But when I'm doing sound design for basses, whatever it may be, I like to put it in the very beginning and have it on like relatively low settings here. Well, I kind of stand corrected. That's pretty heavy-handed, but it's being automated by LFO5 here. It's automating the mix. Just it can be nice to automate these effects with an LFO that's following the shape of your sound, the shape of the main level and filter sound that you have going on. It can just clean things up, get rid of some like weird tails and artifacts, and also just add a little bit more movement to your sound. After that, we have distortion. So this is actually cutting out a decent amount of the lows here. And it's automating the filter so that it opens up a little bit via LFO1 here, okay? So if you can imagine, it doesn't really show it with this distortion. You can see right here the movement, but just imagine the filter going up slightly here. Just giving it a bit more movement. And again, we have LFO2 here following a similar shape as the main LFO, just automating the drive and the mix so that it's the most intense at the peak of the sound. Giving it a bit more movement. That's one of the main things that you're looking for in a lot of sound design, is giving your sounds movement somehow. In the real world, all instruments, they have a ton of movement going on. In the digital world, when we're doing sound design in the very beginning, there's no movement at all. So adding movement as you go is really important. Next, we have the phaser here. Just on a very low depth, frequency, and feedback, and it is being automated again with this LFO. Just the mix is going up. Again, very subtle. These are some things that kind of I've been habitually doing over time. You know, I like the sound of the phaser, so this was added in here kind of off of instinct. A chorus. Giving it more of a detuning sound, kind of. Again, you have to be careful with things like chorus when they're detuning your sounds. Sounds really nice in stereo, but it can mess things up in mono sometimes. Just be aware of it. Next, we have a compressor. It's in the multiband setting. This is it's similar to an OTT. It's very heavy compression here. And you can see instantly it brings out a ton of the sound, squashes it together. Now we're getting some of that grit that we're looking for. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the big ones right there. Adding an EQ, it's not doing a whole hell of a lot, but it's adding some movement in the low end here, just with a little peak here. And then we have a filter here at the end. It's just a low pass filter. We're adding at the end. That's following the movement, the main movement of the sound. And this is just kind of cleaning up the sound a little bit, cleaning up some of the tails that might appear. So you'll notice, you might think at first like, oh, it's kind of losing a little bit of life there, making it a little bit duller. And that's fine, because we know just from experience, and as you do this more and more and get more familiar with sound design, the sound design that you like to do, we know that we are going to be adding more compression and saturation and stuff after this. And that those highs that we're taking away, we're going to be adding them back in. Okay. So that's it for Serum. It's getting to be a cool sound, if we turn off all the effects. We've come a long way from that. So very simple patch with the oscillators. Now we're bringing it to life with all the processing. Okay. So now let's get on into what we're doing in Ableton here. So first of all, an EQ. Taking out some of the low end here. And then this EQ is on mid-side processing. So this means that if you go here, it's on stereo by default, processing the whole thing, the mono signal and the stereo signal, just as one. And whatever you do here, it's going to be cutting it, the whole stereo signal at once. If we go to mid-side processing, what this means is now when we're in mid mode here, the M, we're processing the middle signal, just what's going on in mono. And on the S, we're processing things on the sides. Okay. This is very important to do with a lot of your bass sounds, because bass frequencies can, especially when things are being detuned and, spatial effects are being added, you can get a buildup of low ends on your sides. And this can add to a lot of muddiness. And typically you don't want a lot of stereo low end unless you know what you're doing and you're going for a specific effect, or maybe bringing it out a little bit in your mastering chain for a specific reason. But most of the time we want to be cutting out that stuff. Okay, it just adds a lot of muddiness. So here it's on stereo mode, side mode, and cutting out around, 168 hertz. Next up, we have a reverb. Very subtle right now, but we're going to be adding OTT and compression that's going to be bringing it out more. And this is just it's just putting it in the space that we want it in. Next, Corpus. This is a big one for the sound, okay? Corpus is a really cool plugin within Ableton. I don't mess around with it much, except for when I'm going for a very specific metallic sound. Guys in dubstep will use this a lot for growls and a ton of the sound design that they do. I know Ray Volpe uses Corpus on a lot of his sounds. But for this, it's just adding a nice metallic effect here. Listen. So adding some nice metallicness to the sound that we're going to bring out down the chain even more. Saturator. This is just making it a bit louder. It's clipping also, so it's squashing. We're pushing it, saturating the sound and squashing everything together a little bit. Yeah, so it's adding some nice distortion and making the sound a bit louder. Here with the EQ, it's just taking out a little bit of the low mids, or mids really. They can just start to build up a little bit too much, especially after adding saturation and compression and the like. It just, you can build up too much, really any frequencies, but oftentimes the frequencies that you need to be aware of building up too much are in the mids and the low mids. Those are your trouble zones, your trouble areas often. Okay. And EQ, this is just cleaning up the sound a little bit more and taking out some of those lows that might have been building up here. You see, we don't want that at all. You can't even really hear it, but it will affect things down the chain. And that high end, this I can't remember exactly when I was doing this. In sound design, a lot of the decisions that you're making, it's not like I was consciously making all these decisions in a linear way. Oftentimes, you add effects and then you realize, oh, I need to go back into the chain a little bit further and change something. So this, for instance, you know, it sounds kind of counterintuitive cutting it off right now, because that high end is kind of nice, but I wish I could recall, but it might have been, and it probably was, that I added OTT and it was bringing out too much high end that was making the sound a little bit messy. So then I thought, okay, I need to go back in the chain a little bit, take some out, because I know that it's going to be added in with the OTT and it's going to be too much. So just keep that in mind also when you watch any tutorial. It's very, very, very rare, if ever, that someone just, you know, sat down and like knew exactly what to do. It's a lot of trial and error and going back and forth. Moving on from this EQ, just cleaning up the sound a little bit. Here's a ping pong delay. Adding a nice delay effect and some width there. And you know, it's techno. Techno uses a lot of delays, a lot of reverb, at least in the style that we were going for here. And then here's OTT. So another big change with the sound here. It's more percussive now. There's more high end. It's squashed a little bit, but in a way that we want. The sound is a little bit flatter. And stuff like the reverb and the delay that we added previously is brought out even more. Just makes it sound a little bit more aggressive. Now, the only thing I believe that was changed here was the output was raised a little bit, and most importantly, the time. The time here was turned to the right a lot, almost all the way. If we were to leave the time knob here at the original value, the sound is fat still, but it's a little bit too messy. When you turn this time knob to the right, it makes sounds a bit more percussive and clean them up a little bit. It's not as squashed together, and reverb tails and the like, you know, aren't squashed together into this sound as much. Listen if we turn it all the way to the left. Compared to the right. And we're going for a percussive sound. It's the, you know, this is a metallic stab sound, so we want to bring out that percussiveness and the attack there. Next, we have this EQ here, and this is just taking out some of the low end that probably built up with the OTT. And it didn't here, so forget that, but we're just taking it out anyway. And scooping out a little bit of the highs here. When you're adding OTT and saturation and all these things, you can also get a little bit of harshness, and the high end can start to be more and more pronounced. You just have to be aware of that. So we're just taking out a little bit here. Adding another saturator here. Just beefing up the sound even more. It's increasing the volume and adding some more harmonics to our sound that we want. Next, we have a compressor here. This compressor is making the sound overall a lot tighter and squeezing it together and just louder. We're just trying to bring out a bit more of the percussiveness in the sound here. Okay, so that's one of the final steps here. Just I didn't feel like the sound was quite where we wanted it, and it just needed some more compression to push it to the front a little bit more and bring out that percussiveness in the sound. And finally, we have an EQ here. So this EQ is being used partly as a filter at the end here. And it's also taking out a little bit of the lows here. And then it's slightly rolling off some of the low mids that we have here that are building up. All right, And there we have it. That's how to make this metallic stab in our contact template, available on kabukiaudio.com. This sound is a pretty good example of what you can do with processing that you're using, like how far you can push it, because the sound that we started off with, the patch, is really simple. And in fact, a lot of big names patches out there, you know, in the world of like dubstep, where you have really complex sounds, the patches are very, very, very simple. And then they just have cool movement going on and some interesting processing going on that achieves the sound that they're going for. So you don't always need crazy wavetables. They're great, you know, complex wavetables are great for achieving certain sounds, and they can speed up your process a lot, but a lot of the best sounds out there, very, very simple patches. So I hope that this video was helpful to somebody out there, and that you got a lot out of it, and you were able to learn something and apply these tricks to your own production and sound design. Again, the template is available now on kabukiaudio.com, and thank you for watching.